To obtain listing for a microwave transmitter and receiver, there are several options available. Firstly, contact the manufacturer. Reach out to the manufacturer and inquire if they can provide a listing for the product in the United States. If they cannot provide a listing, explore options for having them submit the product for listing by an appropriate agency. Secondly, engage with a listing agency. Contact underwriters' laboratories or other recognized listing agencies to discuss the possibility of getting the product listed. Provide them with detailed specifications, test data, and documentation on the product. Be prepared to undergo rigorous testing and evaluation procedures required for listing. Thirdly, seek alternate approval from the authority having jurisdiction. If obtaining a listing is not feasible, engage with the AHA and explain the situation. Provide evidence of the product's safety and reliability, such as test reports from an accredited laboratory or a recognized industry standard. Be willing to work with the AHA to develop an alternative approval path that meets their requirements. Fourthly, explore international equivalency. Determine if there is a similar product in the United States that is listed by UL or another recognized agency. If so, work with the local AHA to demonstrate that the Canadian product is equivalent to the listed version. Additional considerations to keep in mind include ensuring that the transmitter and receiver meet the applicable Federal Communications Commission (FCC) regulations for wireless communication. Use shielded cables and proper grounding to minimize electromagnetic interference. Follow best practices for installation and maintenance to ensure the safety and functionality of the system. The process of obtaining a listing can be time-consuming and expensive. It is important to weigh the costs and benefits carefully before pursuing this option. When contacting the manufacturer, provide them with all relevant details about the product, including its specifications, intended use, and any existing certifications or test reports. Inquire about their experience with obtaining listings in the United States and whether they have any existing relationships with listing agencies. If the manufacturer is willing to pursue a listing, work with them to gather the necessary documentation and prepare the product for testing. When engaging with a listing agency, be prepared to provide comprehensive information about the product's design, materials, and manufacturing process. The listing agency will conduct a thorough evaluation of the product to ensure that it meets the applicable safety standards. This may involve physical testing, performance testing, and a review of the product's documentation. If the product fails to meet the requirements of the listing agency, you will need to make the necessary modifications and resubmit it for testing. When seeking alternate approval from the AHA, it is important to establish a clear and open line of communication. Explain the reasons why obtaining a listing is not feasible and provide the AHA with any available evidence of the product's safety and reliability. This may include test reports from an accredited laboratory, certifications from other countries, or a demonstration of the product's performance in a similar application. Be prepared to answer any questions that the AHA may have and to address any concerns they may raise. When exploring international equivalency, research similar products that are already listed in the United States. Compare the specifications and features of the Canadian product to those of the listed product. If the Canadian product is substantially equivalent to the listed product, you may be able to convince the AHA to accept it as an alternative. Ensure that the transmitter and receiver meet the applicable FCC regulations for wireless communication. This includes complying with the requirements for radio frequency emissions, interference, and spectrum usage. You may need to obtain an FCC certification for the product before it can be used in the United States. Use shielded cables and proper grounding to minimize electromagnetic interference. This will help to prevent the transmitter and receiver from interfering with other electronic devices. It will also help to protect the system from damage caused by electrical surges or lightning strikes. Follow best practices for installation and maintenance to ensure the safety and functionality of the system. This includes properly securing the transmitter and receiver, providing adequate ventilation, and regularly inspecting the system for any signs of damage or wear. Consider consulting with a qualified electrician or engineer to ensure that the system is installed and maintained in accordance with the applicable codes and standards. Before pursuing any of these options, carefully weigh the costs and benefits. Obtaining a listing can be expensive and time-consuming, but it can also provide assurance that the product meets the applicable safety standards. Seeking alternate approval from the AHJ may be a more cost-effective option, but it may require more effort to convince the AHJ that the product is safe and reliable. Consider the potential liability risks associated with using a product that is not listed or approved by the AHJ. If the product causes damage or injury, you may be held liable. Ultimately, the decision of whether or not to pursue a listing or seek alternate approval is a business decision that should be based on a careful consideration of all the relevant factors. The authority having jurisdiction, or OJ, is the organization, office, or individual responsible for enforcing the requirements of a code or standard, or for approving equipment, materials, and installation, or procedure. The AHJ is usually a local government agency, such as a building department or fire marshal's office. However, it can also be a federal agency, such as the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, or OSHA, or a private organization, such as an insurance company. The specific requirements for obtaining approval from the AHJ vary depending on the location and the type of equipment or installation. However, in general, the AHJ will want to see evidence that the equipment or installation meets the applicable safety standards. This may include a listing from a recognized testing laboratory such as UL, or a test report from an accredited laboratory. The AHJ may also conduct its own inspection of the equipment or installation to ensure that it meets the requirements. If the AHJ is not satisfied that the equipment or installation meets the applicable safety standards, it may deny the permit or require that the equipment or installation be modified to comply with the requirements. The FCC is an independent agency of the United States government that regulates interstate and international communications by radio, television, wire, satellite, and cable. The FCC is responsible for licensing radio and television stations, regulating cable television systems, and promoting competition in the communications marketplace. The FCC also enforces the laws and regulations that govern the use of the radio spectrum. The FCC regulations cover a wide range of topics, including radio frequency emissions, interference, spectrum usage, and equipment authorization. The FCC regulations are designed to protect the public from harmful interference and to ensure that the radio spectrum is used efficiently. The FCC regulations are constantly evolving to keep pace with technological advances. It is important to stay up to date on the latest FCC regulations to ensure that your equipment and operations comply with the law. Shielded cables are cables that have a metallic shield around the conductors. The shield is designed to block electromagnetic interference, EMI, which can disrupt the signals that are carried by the cable. Shielded cables are used in a variety of applications, including data transmission, audio and video transmission, and power transmission. There are two main types of shielded cables: braided shielded cables and foil shielded cables. Braided shielded cables have a shield that is made of woven strands of metal. Foil shielded cables have a shield that is made of a thin layer of metal foil. Braided shielded cables are more effective at blocking EMI than foil shielded cables, but they are also more expensive. Foil shielded cables are less expensive than braided shielded cables, but they are not as effective at blocking EMI. The type of shielded cable that you should use depends on the application. For applications where EMI is a major concern, such as data transmission, you should use a braided shielded cable. For applications where EMI is not a major concern, such as audio and video transmission, you can use a foil shielded cable. Proper grounding is the process of connecting an electrical circuit or piece of equipment to the earth. This provides a path for electrical current to flow safely to the ground in the event of a fault. Grounding is an important safety measure that can help to prevent electrical shock and fires. There are two main types of grounding: equipment grounding and system grounding. Equipment grounding is the process of connecting the non-current carrying metal parts of electrical equipment to the earth. This includes the metal enclosures of appliances, tools, and other electrical equipment. System grounding is the process of connecting the neutral conductor of an electrical system to the earth. This provides a path for fault current to flow back to the source, which will trip the circuit breaker and energize the circuit. Grounding should be done in accordance with the National Electrical Code (NEC). The NEC specifies the requirements for grounding different types of electrical equipment and systems. The NEC also specifies the requirements for grounding electrodes, which are the devices that are used to connect the electrical system to the earth. Best practices for installation and maintenance include following the manufacturer's instructions for installation and maintenance. Use the correct tools and equipment for the job. Inspect the equipment regularly for signs of damage or wear. Replace any damaged or worn parts immediately. Keep the equipment clean and free of debris. Ensure that the equipment is properly ventilated. Do not overload the equipment. Do not operate the equipment in wet or damp conditions. Disconnect the power supply before performing any maintenance or repairs. Consult a qualified electrician or engineer if you have any questions or concerns. Listing agencies are independent organizations that test and certify products to ensure that they meet certain safety standards. These agencies play a crucial role in verifying that products are safe for consumer use and comply with relevant regulations. The process typically involves rigorous testing and evaluation of the product's design, materials, and performance. If a product meets the required standards, the listing agency will grant it a certification mark or listing indicating that it has been independently verified for safety and compliance. Underwriters Laboratories, ALL, is one of the most well-known and respected listing agencies in the world. They offer a wide range of testing and certification services for various types of products, including electrical equipment, appliances, and building materials. UL certifications are widely recognized and accepted by regulatory bodies and consumers alike. Other recognized listing agencies include Intertek, CSA Group, and TÜV Rheinland. These agencies provide similar testing and certification services, ensuring that products meet the required safety standards and regulations. When choosing a listing agency, it is important to consider their reputation, experience, and the specific standards they test for. It is also important to ensure that the listing agency is accredited by a recognized accreditation body such as the American National Standards Institute (ANSI). Accreditation ensures that the listing agency is competent and impartial in its testing and certification activities. Obtaining a listing from a recognized agency can provide several benefits. Firstly, it provides assurance that the product has been independently verified for safety and compliance. This can help to reduce the risk of product liability and protect consumers from harm. Secondly, a listing can make it easier to obtain regulatory approvals and permits. Many regulatory bodies require that products be listed by a recognized agency before they can be sold or used in their jurisdiction. Thirdly, a listing can enhance the product's marketability and appeal to consumers. Consumers are often more likely to purchase products that have been certified by a trusted listing agency. The cost of obtaining a listing can vary depending on the type of product, the complexity of the testing process, and the listing agency chosen. It is important to obtain quotes from several listing agencies before making a decision. It is also important to factor in the cost of any necessary product modifications or redesigns that may be required to meet the listing requirements. The time it takes to obtain a listing can also vary depending on the type of product in the listing agency. The testing process can be lengthy, especially for complex products that require extensive evaluation. It is important to plan ahead and allow sufficient time for the listing process. Obtaining a listing for a product is a significant investment, but it can provide numerous benefits in terms of safety, compliance, and marketability. It is important to carefully consider all of the factors involved before deciding whether or not to pursue a listing. The Federal Communications Commission (FCC) regulations are a set of rules and guidelines that govern the use of the radio frequency spectrum in the United States. These regulations are designed to ensure that the radio spectrum is used efficiently and that interference between different radio services is minimized. The FCC regulations cover a wide range of topics, including the licensing of radio stations, the allocation of frequencies, the technical standards for radio equipment, and the enforcement of the regulations. The FCC regulations are constantly evolving to keep pace with technological advances and changes in the communications marketplace. It is important for anyone who uses the radio frequency spectrum to be familiar with the FCC regulations and to comply with them. The FCC regulations are codified in Title 47 of the Code of Federal Regulations. The Code of Federal Regulations is a codification of the general and permanent rules and regulations of the United States federal government. The FCC regulations are divided into different parts, each of which covers a specific topic. For example, Part 15 of the FCC regulations covers the rules for unlicensed radio frequency devices such as codeless phones, garage door openers, and wireless microphones. Part 97 of the FCC regulations covers the rules for amateur radio service. The FCC regulations are enforced by the FCC Enforcement Bureau. The Enforcement Bureau investigates and prosecutes violations of the FCC regulations. Violations of the FCC regulations can result in fines, forfeitures, and other penalties. The FCC regulations are an important part of the regulatory framework for the communications industry in the United States. They help to ensure that the radio spectrum is used efficiently and that interference between different radio services is minimized. Compliance with the FCC regulations is essential for anyone who uses the radio frequency spectrum. In the context of the described situation, it is critical to ensure that the 12 volts direct current (DC) microwave transmitter and receiver comply with Part 15 of the FCC rules, which governs unlicensed radio frequency devices. This includes ensuring that the equipment operates within the specified frequency bands, meets the emission limits, and complies with the labeling requirements. Failure to comply with Part 15 of the FCC rules can result in significant penalties, including fines and the seizure of equipment. Test reports from an accredited laboratory are documents that summarize the results of tests performed on a product or material by an accredited laboratory. These reports provide objective evidence that the product or material meets the specified requirements of a standard or specification. Test reports from an accredited laboratory are often required by regulatory bodies such as the FCC or by customers who want to ensure that a product or material is safe and reliable. Accredited laboratories are laboratories that have been assessed by an accreditation body to ensure that they meet the requirements of a standard, such as International Organization for Standardization (ISO 17025). Accreditation bodies are organizations that are recognized by governments or other organizations to accredit laboratories. Accreditation ensures that laboratories are competent to perform specific tests and that they produce reliable and accurate results. Test reports from an accredited laboratory typically include the following information: the name and address of the laboratory, the name and address of the client, a description of the product or material tested, the date of the test method used, the results of the test, a statement of conformity, and the signature of an authorized person. Test reports from an accredited laboratory are valuable documents that can be used to demonstrate that a product or material meets the specified requirements of a standard or specification. They can also be used to support claims about the safety and reliability of a product or material. When selecting an accredited laboratory, it is important to ensure that the laboratory is accredited to perform the specific tests that are required. It is also important to ensure that the laboratory has a good reputation and that it produces reliable and accurate results.